Hi, I'm Kaylee Whalen, an autistic transgender advocate and writer, and I'm here in Antigua, Guatemala with my plush octopus Celia to talk about issues around food and being autistic while traveling. So eating healthy while traveling can be challenging for many people, but it's particularly challenging for autistic people for many reasons. So one of the most common traits of autism is to have sensory issues with processing. You may be hypersensitive or hyposensitive to certain things. With food, this can not only include the smell and the taste, but this can also include the temperature and the texture. And it is quite common for autistic people to have sensory aversions around texture. In addition, it is more common in autistic than non-autistic people to have certain food allergies. So, as an autistic person, you also may have gastrointestinal issues. It's quite common for autistic people to have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or gluten insensitivity or lactose insensitivity. In addition to this, autistic people often really enjoy the same ritual and often the same foods and have a resistance to change. And is so common in autistic people that I already recorded a video about handling change and unexpected situations while traveling for autistic and neurodivergent people. One other aspect of the autistic experience not frequently talked about in relation to food is that autistic people often have a heightened sense of empathy and deeply held, often rigid ethical values. And with food, this can translate to being pescatarian, vegetarian, or vegan. It can also translate to being very into sustainable foods, such as fair trade, organic, and local foods. And this can also make finding food while traveling challenging. So, while these dietary restrictions and sensitivities and ethical choices can make traveling difficult for many autistic people, it is not impossible to enjoy new foods and enjoy your travels as an autistic person. So here's my tips based on my 14 and counting months of traveling solo as an autistic, neurodivergent, trans person. I hope they'll help you. Enjoy your trip. Thank you. So, one of the first things when you're traveling is to be able to advocate for yourself. For too much of our lives, autistic people have been told we're picky eaters, we're not flexible, we can't go with the flow. Why can't you just eat what's on your plate? And that makes it hard to advocate for ourselves and our dietary needs, including while traveling. There's additional peer pressure while traveling. Maybe you're traveling with a friend who really, really wants to try a certain restaurant or a certain dish, and you may be uncomfortable with that restaurant or that dish and be told, why can't you just be flexible? And you might also read or watch a travel blogger or travel vlogger that's like, must eat foods in Vietnam, must try foods here in Guatemala. And as an autistic person, you have to get over the idea that you must try certain foods, or else on the road, you're gonna end up very unhappy. So, advocating for yourself. We, throughout most of our lives, have had to be self-advocates, and that with food on the road means knowing how to politely decline or request food that meets our dietary restrictions. Before you go, learn some basic phrases of how to communicate about what you can, puedo comer in Spanish, and cannot in Thai, might I yin, eat certain foods. Knowing those phrases, and then maybe knowing the phrases or words for certain things you're allergic to. I will link to Legal Nomads, which is a great travel blog for people who have gluten insensitivity, because they have a gluten insensitivity card you can even print out in various languages to communicate that no puedo comer gluten, that you can't eat gluten. So I've often, when I've traveled, if I'm traveling to a new place and don't know the language, I've had a friend, or because I often have tutors in whatever language of the country I'm traveling to, I'll have a friend or a tutor help me write out a card to tell people, I can't eat this, I have an allergy to this. For example, I often have a card saying, I cannot eat cashews, because I actually will stop being able to breathe with certain nuts and cashews, and that is a very serious allergy for me. So being able to communicate and being able to politely decline food. Knowing that language to be polite will go a long way, including if you're staying with a family or in a guest house where they serve you food and it might be seen as culturally impolite to not eat the food. You still have to not eat that food, or else you might be miserable. So knowing how to say very politely, oh, perdón, lo siento, sorry, excuse me, no puedo comer, I can't eat that. Or in Thai, katot naka, mai gin ani, sorry, I can't eat that. As Thai is a gendered language, if you use male pronouns, katot nakra, mai gin ani. So learning some basic phrases like that, and learning beforehand what foods you can eat, which I'll cover in the next section, will help you have a happy and safe trip. So, before traveling, do your research. I've talked about this in my first travel anxiety tips for neurodivergent people video, but learn what you can expect as far as food before you travel, and that can help you have a good time in that country and not have an upset stomach. So, one thing I recommended in my first video is try the food before you go. Try a local restaurant, try a recipe, know if a certain food is going to trigger any sensory aversions, and knowing the ingredients, such as by preparing it yourself, will help you learn if that food may also not meet your dietary restrictions or allergies. So I'd also research, as I said in the last section, how to say you have an allergy, how to say you can't eat a certain thing, and research ahead of time how you can shop for foods that'll be healthy for you. I highly recommend you book an Airbnb or a hostel or other accommodation with a kitchen, because it'll make you feel much safer on the road to have a kitchen where you can prepare foods that are safe for you. And if you can't get a kitchen, at least get a place with a fridge so you can bring foods with you on your travels and go grocery shopping and get safe foods in your fridge. Fridge and a microwave, great. You can also pack a rice cooker, which I've done many times. So when I'm traveling, I'm going to research, such as through Legal Nomads' gluten-free travel guide, where I can get foods that are safe for me, what restaurants and shopping areas, including local markets and supermarkets and organic food markets, I can get food that's safe, knowing the ingredients and trying a few dishes beforehand. As you may see, I am in love with cooking Southeast Asian food. I tried out a lot of Thai and Vietnamese food before I even went there. I learned a lot of the basic phrases for talking about food. I researched the food. I went to Thai restaurants and tried recipes. And I learned, for example, that pad see ew is a very mild dish for me that doesn't trigger gluten insensitivities or dietary restrictions, isn't spicy, and is a safe food for me. So when I first went to Thailand, I had pad see ew almost every other meal. But that's okay. Even if you try one local food, that's great. And go to that organic market or bring some of your own foods and put it in the fridge for other meals. There are several things you can bring on your travels to ensure that you have some safe foods and can get your dietary restrictions met while traveling so you can enjoy yourself. So one of the first things I recommend is booking a place with a kitchen. That's going to make your life easier so that way you can cook some safe foods. If you can book a place that at least has a fridge, one thing that's easy to take with you is a rice cooker. I'm gluten-free, and I usually eat tempeh and other vegan foods that can be easily prepared in a rice cooker, especially if it has a steamer basket. So I'll bring a rice cooker when I can't book a kitchen. Then bring some basic ingredients that will help you. A basic spice mix. Now, I'm both Latinx and grew up in the Maryland, Chesapeake Bay area, so my two go-to spice mixes are adobo seasoning and Old Bay seasoning. And if I have those things, I can be happy. And bringing some basic ingredients, such as, for me, with an egg allergy, I bring an egg replacer. I'll also bring, possibly because of my lactose intolerance, a powdered soy milk or powdered coconut milk, which you can also add to your rice. And yes, I'll bring rice, or sometimes instant gluten-free noodles, instant soup mixes, instant oatmeal. And in addition to all of that, I want to make sure I have all my medications and nutritional supplements and herbal medications that might help me stay healthy. Now, I am not a nutritionist or a doctor, but on the road, I really benefit from having ginger tea, certain herbal tea blends such as my stomach ease tea, and that stomach ease tea has ingredients including peppermint and licorice, which can really help my digestion if it's upset. I carry slippery elm powder, which you can also buy in capsules, which helps with, well, IBS issues, pretty much any kind of GI tract issues. Slippery elm powder is great for. And also when you're traveling, know on the road what foods might keep longer. Now, gluten and dairy are two of my biggest triggers, and I tend to eat organic and pescatarian. So my primary source of protein, especially at home for maybe 2/3 of my meals, is tempeh. Tempeh keeps very well, especially the type that's not already marinated or has sugar. And I can carry like 4 sticks of tempeh in my baggage, and I'll have my safe food whenever I want. And I might carry some cooked tempeh on the plane with some cooked rice. Now, if you are going to bring cooked and prepared foods on a plane, I would highly recommend having them easily accessible to take out of your bag, show to airport security, explain it's food. They still might do the little swipe test to check that it's not drugs or something. But I've also had experiences where I'm like, here's my cookies. And the airport security be like, oh, those are such nice homemade cookies. Here, let me put them aside so they don't get damaged. So generally, airport security doesn't really give you a hard time about food. The main exceptions would be anything seen as a liquid or a gel. I've had them throw away my sunflower butter. Yes, I'm allergic to nuts. I like sunflower butter. I've had them throw away my ice cream that had melted. Another thing to prepare before you go is, again, knowing that your hotel or your accommodation might have a fridge. Call ahead. If you say you need a fridge for medical reasons, hotels are used to providing fridges for no additional cost for people who might be carrying medications that need to be refrigerated and for carrying breast milk. So often, if you say you need a fridge for medical reasons, they will provide you one free of charge, and advocate for yourself. Get that fridge. If you are traveling for work, know your rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act, that you have a right as an autistic person and as a person with dietary restrictions. Both are covered under the ADA, that you can request workplace accommodations. So, if you're traveling for work, I highly recommend beforehand you have an accommodation on file regarding your dietary restrictions, and I'd recommend for booking hotels or accommodations, if at all possible, your accommodation include a place with a kitchen and or, at the very least, a fridge and a microwave. So I have not had the greatest experiences before I learned to have an ADA accommodation on file at my workplace. At one nonprofit I worked for, which otherwise I loved, I had an experience where I was at an off-site work conference. And in that morning, I had requested ahead of time a gluten-free oatmeal, which I know keeps me happy. But when I arrived, I saw a spread of glutinous pastries and breakfast items with dairy, neither of which I can eat. And I was told by coworkers, oh, this wonderful board member brought this food. Can you be flexible and eat this instead? And I had to go without breakfast. Then, when lunch came, my order that was organic and gluten-free didn't come. And I had to go get it myself and was extremely hungry by the time I arrived and was upset. And I had a meltdown. And I got annoyed at a coworker who had failed to get my lunch order. And I was disciplined later for being rude about the lunch order. Retroactively, I had to advocate for myself using an ADA accommodation that I put on file after that experience to ensure that in the future, my coworkers and my workplace knew that I had to have certain foods, and I was able to have that disciplinary record removed because they understood that my experience of having a meltdown and being upset for not having food I could eat was part of being autistic and having dietary restrictions. So remember, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, dietary restrictions are covered as a disability, as is autism spectrum disorder, and you should absolutely have an ADA accommodation on file at your workplace. One final thought I have about food is that while it's good to have safe foods that you know that keep you happy, sometimes getting a little uncomfortable and pushing through change, yes, change is difficult. I know, I recorded a whole video about it. Change while travel is difficult. But working through that difficulty, working through those unexpected situations and trying something new can be a great experience. So, if eating most of the food that you brought from home, my tempeh and rice I brought from home or bought at a local market, my gluten-free bread that I might have brought here, I actually traveled through Spain with a loaf of gluten-free bread to 4 different cities. And that let me try new restaurants and try new things. Because every restaurant you go to, they'll serve things with bread. If you want to try the local ham, the jamon serrano, they will serve that on a bocadilla, a baguette type bread. And I would actually go to places and request that I use my own bread, and they'll serve me the food without the bread. So making some accommodations to be a little more flexible, that having that gluten-free bread made me more willing to try out places. And pushing through that uncomfortability let me enjoy some new foods. That said, paella is a food I grew up with. I grew up with a more Puerto Rican style paella from my mother and grandfather. And Spain was a great place that I knew I could get paella as a safety food. But otherwise, I tried new foods. Now, I also have what I call the 80-20 rule, which is that 20% of the time, maybe try to get yourself a little uncomfortable. Try something new. Let your body see if it can adjust to a slightly different cuisine. And sometimes, being in a different setting, you might get used to a different cuisine than you have at home. And I've often had the experience that I get used to a new cuisine while traveling, and when I get home, I just don't eat it. Like I mentioned, I'm mostly pescatarian, but when I'm traveling, I often have to be a little bit more flexible, and I like trying some local dishes. So I will eat un poco pollo, a little bit of chicken, and sometimes in Thailand or the Philippines, especially the Philippines where pork is very common, or Spain where the jamon serrano, the very specialty cured ham there, I'll have a little bit of pork. And that 20% of trying something different, trying something local, I know my body can't digest a lot of meat. Ethically, I don't like eating a lot of meat. But I do enjoy my travel, that maybe that 20% of the time, 1 out of every 5 meals, I might try something that stretches my diet. And if I feel uncomfortable from that change, and I have IBS or other problems, having my herbal medications, having my tea, having my prescription medications there as a safety net will help me. And maybe I won't try that food again. So, stretch your palate. Try something new. You might like it. And if you don't, the other 4 out of 5 times, stick with foods you know. So, I hope that helps you enjoy your travels, because dining while traveling can be amazing, but it can also be stressful. And these tips are meant to help you enjoy your time on the road. So, I'm about to have La Bruja restaurant right around the corner serve me a gluten-free, vegan, organic tempeh burger. I'm so excited, looking forward to it. I'll be sharing some photos, and thank you for joining me.